Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another hopefully awesome episode from your two favorite people. You got Mike going through a current rebrand over on the channel and everything, so go over check it out. My buddy Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports. We're here to talk some mostly football today with you. So, how we doing?
I'm doing pretty good. XFL, USFL, anything we can talk about, it's football, and I can't wait to get into it. Some cool stuff to talk about as always, man.
Definitely. So, we're going to start with week 2 review for the XFL. Our first game was St. Louis at Seattle. We had a heck of a performance by AJ McCarron again. Yes, that's my guy. AJ is freaking awesome. He had a little rust at the beginning. That first drive was but after that second drive, it kind of slowly up and down clicked for him. At the end of the day, it was another, oh my gosh, the Battlehawks won on the last play of the game type of thing. And it's like, maybe so, but you know what? It's a Battlehawks win. Everyone's still rusty. They're still trying to get into the groove of things here. So this garbage of all these teams are not good. You don't know football, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Or you do, and you just really don't like the competition on the field. So you don't need to say much. But, I mean, overall, for me personally, I think it was a good game. I was shocked that Lumen Field had over 10,000 people at the game. That was amazing. I mean, for a team that obviously is not the stinker of the league, we'll get to them in a bit. But, as much as I don't care for the Seattle Sea Dragons, it's obvious, they could easily be 2-0 or 1-1 for sure. I mean, there's something there in Seattle, and eventually it's going to click, in my opinion. Great performance by both quarterbacks. Awesome. Ben DiNucci looked a lot better than last week. I mean, granted, if you don't throw 54 passes, you throw under that, you're definitely going to look better than the previous week when you did throw 54 passes. You still had both weeks a high completion percentage because you were like, I think he was like 22 of 29 or something this week, and last week he was 35 of 54. Of course, a lot of people like me who focus on the quarterback position are going to, look at and dwell on the dude threw 54 passes. But, I mean, if you take that out, because, that was last week. So if you just look at the sample size from this past week, it's a good sample size. That's about where you want the quarterback to be, right around 30, 35 passes at most. You want the balanced offense. The only thing is, the only stickler that I have with Ben DiNucci from this past week is, dude, you've got to realize that Josh Gordon is a weapon and is open a lot earlier than you did against St. Louis here, because you waited way too long to start connecting with him. He only had one catch for like 33 yards, if I remember the stat correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And, outside of McCarron, yes, Prohl is a weapon for St. Louis, but outside of McCarron and Prohl, because of Brian Hill being hurt, it kind of makes it iffy, in my opinion, with St. Louis of like, where is their number one guy? But overall, I give this game a 10 out of 10. This was awesome to be able to go back and watch. Came down to the wire. the kicker, oh my goodness, the St. Louis kicker had missed a couple of kicks previous in the night. And you could tell going into that game-winning kick that he was kind of rattled and shaken. And then I believe, didn't they call a timeout right before he made the kick? And yeah, they called the timeout, and he must have went in the timeout and just like centered himself and went out and nailed the sucker. That was awesome. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you look at these two teams, and kind of like you said, it's a game of opposites here with these two teams because Seattle could easily be 2-0. St. Louis could easily be 0-2. I mean, that's a fact. There's no way to go around it. But at the end of the day, these two teams are St. Louis 2-0, Seattle 0-2. There's nothing you can do about it. But water's going to meet its level, and you do feel like Seattle will start to win eventually because they do have, a pretty solid team. Both games that they lost, they weren't, playing completely poorly. Overall, I do agree with you that Ben DiNucci does need to get the ball to Josh Gordon way more earlier in the game, more often. You can't ignore the guy. You can't start throwing the ball to him at the end when it's crunch time. Because of the fact if you get him involved earlier in the game, you might actually be winning and have a lead that you can sustain instead of having to come back, to try to win the game like they did in this game. They took the lead, and then St. Louis did go down the field and kick, the field goal to win the game, which overall, like you said, Gutsy the kicker, he played well, after shaking off the misses to come back out there and hit that game-winning field goal. So that was huge for him and his confidence. And A.J. McCarron, he's a second-half quarterback right now. In the first half, he just doesn't look like, a guy that's still, capable of playing high-level football. And then in the second half, he goes out there and he's running around like he's 25, and he's scrambling and he's completing passes, up the middle of the field. He just looks like a completely different player. Mm-hmm. And if, A.J. McCarron did not do what, he has done in the second half, specifically the fourth quarter of these last two games, they're 0-2. And the argument that St. Louis, because I've heard the argument, from other people that St. Louis is the team to beat. This is St. Louis's league and everyone else is living in it. I mean, that's not true. They barely won both the games they played. They barely won them both. I mean, if they continue to do that, then yeah, it is their league and everyone else is living in it. But again, if water does meet its level, they will start to lose because St. Louis is going to get in games where they're, flirting with disaster, trying, to basically give the game away and then come back at the end. You can't always bank on that. Mm-hmm. So St. Louis does need to come out earlier in games, and play, at a high level in the first half. And then if they can do that, it will really show they're a great team. I think St. Louis is really good, but like I said, they could easily be 0-2. And with Seattle, same thing. If you get the ball to Josh Gordon, if you start running your offense better earlier on in the game, you could be 2-0 as well. Unfortunately, for Seattle, they didn't have the ball last in this game. Mm-hmm. If they did, they win. But St. Louis went down the field, kicked the field goal. It was a great game. It was one of the best. It was probably the best game overall with the competitiveness of it. You didn't know who was going to win factor. So it was a great game. But it's unfortunate for Seattle. They're 0-2 because they could be 2-0. But good win for St. Louis. It's just going to be interesting to see moving forward if they can keep squeaking out these wins or if they will finally get beat. But they are playing well, but they found a way to win both games.
Mm-hmm. The other piece that I'm surprised you didn't mention mm-hmm. is, what happens and what does it show for St. Louis if, they start to mesh better and mold and hit the fold where you're not seeing these close games. You're having Houston Roughneck style games. You're blowing every team out, mm-hmm. kind of thing. And, to your point, San Antonio should have been a test, but that was week 1. So that game being as close as it was makes sense. We'll go into this more a little bit later, but I think this week is really going to be a big test for St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said, I basically pointed out kind of to your point that they have to play better in the first half if they want to be the best team in this league, and they are capable of it. Because if you can do what you're doing late in the game in the second half, then you are capable of doing it in the first half. It's just about going out there and playing well the whole game. But I do think St. Louis is a really good team. But Seattle, I mean, you look at them, and overall, like I said, they could be 2-0. They just fell short in both games, but I don't think their season's lost at all, for sure. I think that this was a high-level game, and hopefully there's more games in the future in the XFL that are like this game.
Oh, for sure. We'll get into this more in a later segment in the show, but, it's funny to me that my two favorite teams in this league are the top two dogs. And, when I give my, what, a little bit later, it is hard not to give St. Louis the edge just because my love for St. Louis and the man on screen carrying the ball there, AJ McCarron. I just, it's so close, but Houston obviously holds the edge. Now, that's still to be seen because I believe at some point Seattle has to play Houston. So it is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one last side note. I think it's really cool with AJ McCarron, the fact that how passionate he is, when they won the two games and him being interviewed, and he's getting a little emotional. It's really cool to see. He really wants to play. And, he could probably still be a backup in the NFL, potentially. And he'd probably be making a lot more money. But it's really just cool. He wants to play in this league. He wants to play. I think that, sometimes it's a lost thing with sports is that sometimes playing matters more than, anything else. And that's really cool.
Yep. So we go from one of the highs of XFL week 2 to one of the most god-awful, make me throw up, and just glad that I couldn't watch the whole game performances of week 2. I mean, congrats to DC. DC is another example of, you're 2-0. You should be 1-1 after this performance by Vegas. You should be 1-1. I mean, people don't like to hear it, but, weather did play a factor in this. You had weather. You had the fact that Cashman Field was not set up properly. You had the fact that the field was painted on. It's not natural because all the natural grass is dead underneath all the paint. You had all the divots and the holes in the grass. It was just a bad showing of offense. I mean, 6-0 at halftime, lead by Vegas. Okay, that's cool. Obviously, you're a first half team because this is 2 weeks in a row now that you have fallen apart in the second half. You're not reliable. I don't want to sound like I'm going back down into a little hole here as Mr. Negative, but I want to say you suck, Vegas, but I don't have enough information to say that you suck. You haven't figured it out, is what I'll say. You haven't figured out, and realistically, in my opinion, DC hasn't either. And that's why when we get into the week 3 picks, I have a feeling the way that I do between DC's week 3 game. DC is one-dimensional. They don't throw the ball. When they do, they don't do it very well. You've got a 2-quarterback system. Essentially, both quarterbacks are runners, not passers. At least the form that they've been taking in this year. The one bright side outside of the QBs that DC has is the man on screen running away from everybody. Mr. Abram, uh, isn't it Smith?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Abram Smith from Baylor. That was an awesome pick by them. That was a great pick. Number one overall. He's definitely, in my opinion, he's proven why he should have been number one and was number one overall. Balling out, awesome dude. But you're looking at two teams that do not realistically have an identity. Louis Perez, awesome. He's a good QB.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he's kind of lost his touch since 2019 AAF, and then 20. I don't think he was in the 2020 version in the XFL,
Mm-hmm.
but from last year in the USFL for sure. I mean, there comes a point too, if you're going to teach yourself about how to play quarterback on YouTube, it's only going to be able to take you so far. But I mean, yeah, overall, I just absolutely did not like the performance from this game. DC just again caught some lucky breaks here and just managed to pull away in the end. And it was just a bad performance overall by Vegas. In my opinion, I do think Louis will start this week, but I think personally it should be Brett Hundley. But yeah, floor is yours.
Yeah, this game right here for the XFL was just awful because overall, this game was in the worst possible time slot imaginable because it came on at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night when you had NBA coming on and you had all these college basketball games, including Indiana Purdue, that was getting all the ratings. So the ratings for this game were bad. It was on FX and ESPN Plus. No one watched this game hardly at all on TV because it was just on at a bad time. And the game was horrible. And you got the fact of the matter that the weather was bad. And you have the fact that you're playing on Cashman Field, but yet no cash was put into the field. There was no effort at all. And the fact that there was not that many people at the game. And thanks, Mark. and the fact that you had all those people at the game that were there, and then when the rain set in, they left. A lot of them left. So it was just a bad showing overall from, a monetary standpoint for the XFL. And if you look at Vegas, Louis Perez last year, I mean, I don't really remember as far back as, the few years ago, but you look at Louis Perez last year for the New Jersey Generals. They used a 2-quarterback system. They brought in DeAndre Johnson to run. And then Louis Perez, he threw the ball. So they had 2 quarterbacks. So it wasn't all on Louis Perez's shoulders. Vegas is not doing that with Louis Perez this time around. They're having him throw the ball. Mm-hmm. And to me, just they're not bringing any other quarterback to run the ball to take some weight off him. They're making him do everything. And I'm not saying he's a one-dimensional quarterback, but he kind of is. His flaws are being exposed more in this league right now, which you didn't see in the USFL last year when they had the 2-quarterback system with New Jersey. And I just think overall that Louis Perez, he's going to need help at the quarterback position. If Vegas is going to have a chance this season, they need to bring in Hundley, mix it up. But I just think overall that Louis Perez is just, it's a flawed system with the way that they're running offense with him. And he's not going to do any better if they don't mix it up. And Vegas is just going to keep losing games. Now, with DC, the weather benefited them because when the conditions are poor and the weather's bad, running the ball helps. And you look at the 2 quarterbacks, like you said, De'Aaron King and Jordan, Te'amu, both run the ball. And the weather was bad, so they ran the ball. They didn't throw much. You can't throw the ball when the weather's poor. It just doesn't really work that well. So I just think overall this game benefited DC, especially as the weather conditions worsened in the second half. That's why they put up 18 points, and Vegas didn't score again. Because it's kind of like, I know no one really cares about this right now. Probably maybe Mark if he's still watching, but you got like Indiana, Michigan State last year. You had Dexter Williams at quarterback. for Indiana in that game who was a runner instead of Connor Bazelak, who only throws the ball. If Connor Bazelak's throwing the ball in that game, they lose. But the weather got bad. It started to snow. And then in the second half, Indiana was just running all over Michigan State in the snow. And Michigan State was trying to throw the ball with Peyton Thorne, and they lost. The weather benefits running teams. That's why I thought when it started to snow with the Bills, I thought Josh Allen would win. But it didn't happen. This game benefited DC with the running quarterbacks. It didn't benefit Louis Perez. Vegas is going to have to find a way to either use Brett Hundley and Louis Perez or get another quarterback that runs a lot and then have Louis Perez throw, because right now their offense is so easy to figure out and teams are stopping Perez, making him look not like the king of the USFL, XFL, CFL, all these alternative leagues you can imagine, AF. So unfortunately for him, it's just not looking good, but they're going to have to get things figured out. But this was the worst game by far, just with the production of it. Everything was bad. I mean, even the cameras, there were spots of rain all over. You could barely watch the game. It was just a bad game overall, not enjoyable in any facet of the game at all, with the game itself and everything around it. So the XFL, you can't have any more games like this. The games could be bad, but you just can't have everything else be bad, because this game was just horrible all the way around, and I do think they need to move from Cashman Field. That's not going to work, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, just over 6,000 people in attendance. Ratings were low, really low. I mean, okay, if you are going to play one game on Saturday, do it at like 4 o'clock.
It can't be 7 where all the other good sports are going on, man. Soccer and basketball and NBA. You know, it was just horrible. Horrible.
Bad timing. Bad.
And on FX.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Someone has their name in the Discord that says FX is not just a movie channel or something. It is just a movie channel. It's not a sports channel. Something like it.
Well, it's part of ESPN, apparently.
I know.
So, you know, they're trying to rebrand it.
I mean, it's cool when you have in the top right corner ESPN on ABC, but it just doesn't do as well when it's ESPN on FX. And then when I'm turning the game on, they got Ant-Man on or Iron Man or some movie coming on before and then after something else. It's like, that just doesn't work. You watch ESPN and then the game ends and then you got another game coming on, or you got Sports Center with Scott Van Pelt or something, or you've got whatever. It just doesn't work when you've got movies all around these games. It's just bizarre. And the time slot was horrible, like you said. Like I said, it was just bad.
Yes, I think a lot, to your point, a lot of the ratings problems for this was the time. I mean, and then the fact that, like, okay, well, if we want to do a comparison, if we look at the NFL on Saturday, well, bruh, cool your shits. That's the NFL. This is the freaking XFL.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL Network with the Colts Vikings and the complete colossal collapse of the Colts losing to the Vikings is going to garner more ratings than an XFL game on FX at 7 o'clock with all these other sports on. And plus that game with the NFL Network with the Colts Vikings was in the afternoon, and there was not as many dire games happening. College basketball was earlier in the year where people were still interested in football more. It's not the same thing like you said.
All right, so the next one, we kind of saw this coming. Because I'm going to say this. Your buddy Paxton Lynch is not the guy. He had a decent performance, in my opinion. But for what Orlando needs and what they're looking for, it's just not going to work. Way better performance by Jack Cohn. Jack Cohn, I would give Jack Cohn, even though I've now said Jack Cohn 4 times in the span of like 2 minutes, I'd give him an A+ almost, 10 out of 10, because he played the better game. He performed better. I mean, obviously, you know, it's Orlando. And shout out to your guy on Orlando because he caught one touchdown, didn't he? Or was it
Cody
two?
Latimer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he played well again.
That's right. It was Latimer and Jamil that caught the touchdowns for Orlando. Two awesome, great wide receivers, but for whatever reason, Orlando does not know how to use them. To your point, it was visibly obvious on screen of how just keeping it PG angry the Orlando head coach was. I mean, that was bad, poor, sick in a bad way performance by Orlando.
I mean, the reporter was like, "Is there anything positive you can take away from this game?" He's like, "No." Perfect response. I mean, nothing.
Nope.
I mean, literally, if Cody Latimer was a quarterback, instead of a receiver, and he had the skills that he has at receiver, but he was actually a quarterback, then they could be good. But instead, you've got all these talented skill guys, but then you've got horrible quarterbacks, and your O-line is not great. I mean, again, to be fair, it's not the best, which doesn't help Lynch out. But again, Lynch is too big, and he's not quick enough to escape either.
Yes. We could talk about this more in the preview, but I would almost go with either Dormandy or Francois to start this week. But something tells me they're going to be stupid or not. Well, clean it up. They're not going to be smart, and they're going to go with Paxton Lynch again, and that's not a good move here.
My thing is there are tons of quarterbacks that I'm sure sitting on their couch right now and saying, I could do better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's out there. Orlando, somebody's out there. Sign that guy. I mean, it's nothing against these guys here. I mean, they want their fair opportunity. But Paxton Lynch, my thing with Paxton Lynch, as I've said before, is he's had so many opportunities already. He's been in every league imaginable, and every single team that he's played on in these leagues has been bad. It just kind of just seems like you can't give him any more chances. And I mean, I know the argument is the O-line. I understand that because Michigan's O-line wasn't good last year in the USFL. It wasn't very good, which is why when we did our, USFL college draft last week, the takeaways, Michigan drafted 4 offensive linemen. They did that for a reason. That was done on purpose because their O-line was horrible. So good move for Michigan. Hopefully these linemen are better. But still, Paxton Lynch, if he was really good, if he was truly a former first-round draft pick level quarterback, would be able to overcome a bad O-line. Joe Burrow does most of the time. His O-line's horrible, but he is good. Paxton Lynch is not good. Paxton Lynch, I like Paxton Lynch. I want you to succeed, Paxton Lynch. I like you, Paxton Lynch. I really do. When I'm saying you're not good, it's nothing against you. It's just your play is not great. It's inevitable at this point that he's been in every one of these leagues and it hasn't worked out. And maybe if he had a pristine O-line, maybe if it was the greatest offensive line ever constructed, Paxton Lynch might be pretty good. But any quarterback would be good if you got the greatest O-line ever. None of these teams have great offensive linemen. If they were great, they'd be in the NFL. I mean, that's unfortunately the flawed nature of these leagues. You're not going to have the best players at the positions that you need. So Paxton Lynch, if he again was truly a former first-round NFL draft pick, he would be able to overcome this, but he isn't. And you see with the other quarterbacks, they're not performing well either. Because if Dormandy or Francois came in and just started lighting it up, Lynch would never play again for this team. But the reason they keep going with Lynch is because the other two haven't shown enough either to say that we're better. I mean, Dormandy comes in, he might throw you a touchdown, and he throws 2 or 3 picks. Francois is running for his life, and then he just throws it away or gets sacked or he throws a pick. It's just not good offense overall. They need a new quarterback. I feel they need a new quarterback. But if they don't get one soon, then their season's already going to be lost. And for San Antonio, easiest win ever. I mean, you got to win. Good job to get, the first win on the board. But overall, I mean, this was an easy win. They didn't really have to play super well to win. And unfortunately for Orlando, last thing, they had a pretty good crowd. That was a good crowd. And obviously the weather was good. So you can see it was bright and clear and all that. And it's Orlando. There's a lot of people. But you're not going to keep these fans if Orlando continues to be bad.
Mm-mm. No. I think if they lose one more game, you're going to start seeing the attendance go down.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You're going to start seeing the attendance go down. You're going to start seeing the fan base kind of like, I mean, there are some XFL fans I've talked to already. They're like, can we ship Orlando out and bring the Apollos back? Which, I mean,
you'd have to get a new team. I mean, keep Cody Latimer, keep Jamil, keep Charleston Rambo, and keep a couple of the good defensive players. But the rest of the team needs an overhaul. The whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can bring the Apollos back, but you got to get the roster back, from the Apollos.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to your point, what's Garrett Gilbert doing? I mean, Garrett Gilbert was a freaking monstrous beast in the AAF.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could think of probably, 100 players that are not playing right now.
Gosh,
at any position that will do better than some of these players I'm seeing right now, especially for Orlando. And they're not playing. And you want to see them back. And maybe they don't want to play football anymore. Who knows? But Orlando needs help. So please, Orlando, sign some players that are going to help you win. Thanks for being here. Way to go, guys. Good stuff. Yeah, well, this game was not good stuff unless you're a Brahmas fan. That was a pretty good game then.
Yep. So speaking of good game, let's talk about the other great game of the week. Oh my gosh. This was crazy. The fact that Arlington jumped out to a decent lead, wasn't it? Or was that backwards?
Yeah, Arlington was winning.
That's right. Yes, they jumped out to like 11-0, just like how Seattle jumped out to 12-0 and then turned around and blew it. We saw the Houston defense tighten in the second half in this one for sure, because at halftime, Arlington was leading 14-11. So Arlington did manage to claw out of an early 11-0 hole in this. Again, another awesome, great game from Brandon Silvers. Hey, there's an idea. Why don't you look into trades, Orlando? There is a guy that was on the sideline. There were two guys on the sidelines at this game specifically that are better. I like Francois too. Dormandy's okay, but they're both better than any of the three quarterbacks that you got.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Slaughter was sitting on the sideline for Arlington. And from the picture that I found, he looked pretty angry about it too.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, why don't they get Kyle Sloter? I mean, all you got to do is trade like 4 of your terrible defensive players to Arlington and get Kyle Sloter, and maybe you can win. I mean, there's people out there. There's still quarterbacks out there. I mean, get someone from the CFL, somebody.
Or the guy on the other sideline, Mr. Cole McDonald. Cole McDonald has all this hype around him, and he does look pretty good. He looks pretty good. But when you've got all this hype and you're only playing the conversions, it doesn't look good as far as like who has the edge. But again, overall, awesome performance by Brandon Silvers. Great quarterback. Drew Plitt is not the guy. Completely overrated. And I know that's a little harsh, but, stated before, QBs are my thing. Love quarterbacks. Drew Plitt was great at Ball State. But guess what? Ball State is a MAC school. What's a MAC school? It's a group of 5 school. The competition is not the same.
To be fair, Brandon Silvers was at Troy too.
True.
And Cole McDonald was at Hawaii. So, I mean, all of these are most of them small schools that they played for. I mean, I agree with your argument. I totally get your argument, but it's not definitive either because most of these guys did play at a small level.
Yeah, yes, that's true. I just, I guess my point is, like, I get the hype if they're really good, but the hype needs to, it's almost like the hype
needs to be warranted.
Too much. Yes, it's too much hype, and the guys are not living up to the hype. But yes, so I think I kind of went off the rails on the last 2 games as well. So for DC, that game is like a 4 out of 10 for me. I give that thing a freaking C-, and that's me being nice. The Brahmas game, I like Jack Cohn. Yes, he played a year at Notre Dame. Don't like Notre Dame, but that's a whole nother story. And I don't hold it against him. He's a good quarterback. So from a Brahmas standpoint, I give that game an 8 out of 10. I give it a B+. This game, Houston is my other favorite team in the XFL. This game was awesome. I give this game a 9 out of 10 because I'm trying to be realistic, because there are still things Houston needs to fix. 9 out of 10, an A on this one for me. And I don't know if I basically stole all your thunder and touched on everything, but what are your thoughts?
Well, one thing you didn't mention that I will say is that I think Arlington is a potential team that was overrated after week 1. And the reason why is because they beat a Vegas team. And I did say this last week. They beat a Vegas team that had 2 pick sixes. And yeah, you have to pick the ball off and you have to physically run down the field and score the touchdown. So kudos to Arlington for getting that job done. But when you're only winning games like that, and I know it's plural and that was only 1 game, so that's not an accurate statement, but still, you won a game through 2 pick sixes. You got nothing on offense. Drew Plitt, he had 1 pick. He threw for 160 yards. That's not impressive. So he wasn't the reason they won the game. In this game here, they scored 14 points. They weren't pick sixes or scoop and score. They scored 14 points because Houston turned it over twice. And they were in short field situations and they scored. So if you take out the turnovers, Arlington hasn't really scored a point on their own. Off I'm getting the ball at the 30-yard line and I got to go down the field. Traditionally, they're only scoring off turnovers. So if they can't score a normal touchdown drive with Plitt, or if they finally, to your point, wise up and bring in Sloter, then there's a really good chance that Arlington's not going to win many games because they're not scoring the right way. They're scoring the awesome way, but you can't rely on that. You can't rely on turnovers from the other team to score. You have to score on your own. Houston, I thought they played well, but they played better last week. They played much better last week. They didn't play as well this week. For a time, thought they might lose because Arlington got up 14-11 off the 2 turnovers. I'm like, well, if Houston's just going to keep turning it over, Arlington's going to win. But Houston in the second half got it back together, got the touchdown they needed, the scores, whatever, and they won. But Arlington just has not impressed me at all. They have not done anything on offense. Their defense has done really good, but it's like Iowa. They're like Iowa football right now. Maybe not as bad on offense as Iowa normally has been the last few years, but Iowa relies on their defense to win them games. Turnovers. I mean, they literally, beat Minnesota because they got a turnover at the end and the guy ran it back to the 1 or whatever, or something like that. Or he might have been stepped out a little earlier, but he got all the way to the 1. They called it back. Then they scored on a short field and won the game. They only had to go like 25 yards. If that turnover doesn't happen, Minnesota wins because Iowa can't score on their own. And Arlington hasn't proven that so far. So that's the biggest worry for me with them. But Houston, I thought they played well. We got to keep the turnovers down. Even in their other win in week 1, they had a couple turnovers. I think Silver's had 2 picks in that game as well. So they're going to have to keep the turnovers at a minimum if they want to be the best team in this league. Because when they don't turn it over, they're pretty good.
Yeah. They are virtually unstoppable when they don't turn it over. All right. So let's talk some power rankings. Obviously, these are yours. So I'm going to let you start. Give your explanation. I didn't have time for personal reasons, to do one. You said that was okay. So I'll just give you mine off of yours. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Houston, I mean, they've been the most dominant team through the first 2 weeks, even though they've been turnover prone. So, I mean, they're the number 1 team. I mean, they were fantastic in week 1 despite the 2 picks. And then this past week, they did struggle a little bit, but they still relatively dominated the game. If you take out the turnovers and Arlington doesn't score on those turnovers, Houston wins that game by a massive amount as well. So overall, I just think that Houston is the most dominant team early on, and obviously these rankings are going to probably change a million times between now and the end of the season. But as of now, Houston's the number 1 team. If you take away the turnovers, they're by far the best team. With the turnovers, they're still the best team for now, but it is by a slimmer margin. DC, I have at number 2, and I know that to your point that they were not impressive against Vegas, and they were not impressive in week 1 either. But it might be a little bit of a fickle argument to have them over St. Louis, but to me, they won both games by more. And again, these rankings are going to change, and I do think St. Louis is the better team than DC, but DC has won their games by more. Even though the teams that they played weren't that great overall, and I do, think that there are a lot of flaws with their team, with the fact that they don't have a quarterback that's actually capable of passing the ball consistently, and they have 2 quarterbacks that are essentially carbon copies of the other, except De'Aaron King is probably quicker. They're not going to hold here, probably, number 2. But for now, what they've done, results are results, they're at number 2. St. Louis, I have at number 3 because both games they won, they shouldn't have, technically. They should have lost both games. And if they're 0-2, I'd have them as the best team that's 0-2. Which you see who I have as the best team at 0-2, and I'll get to them and use the same argument. St. Louis, if they were 0-2, I would have as the top 0-2 team. They won both their games. They found ways to win. And that's a great quality to have. But until St. Louis plays a full game and they can prove that they can play in first half and in the second half at a high level, and they're barely squeaking out games like this, to me, it's eventually going to catch up with them, and they're going to lose. So I have them at number 3 because they barely won both games, and they could have lost both, even though I do think on paper St. Louis is better than DC. But again, these rankings are going to change. San Antonio's at number 4. They were really dominant over Orlando, even though obviously that's seemingly easy to do right now. And they did lose their first game, but it wasn't a bad loss. So I think that overall, San Antonio, they look pretty good. And if they can bottle up that Orlando performance and keep playing well, then I think that they could potentially be a team that's in the top half of the league. So I have them at number 4. Arlington's at number 5, and it's because they have no offense. I mean, yeah, they did win their first game over Vegas, but week 2, to me, it just further proves that they can't score on their own. They have to have turnovers, as I've pointed out several times. And until Arlington has an offense, I don't see how they're going to be a top half team in the league because of the fact you have to have offense and you have to score without the help of your defense. You can't rely on your defense to help you. So I think that Arlington, while a team that has potential, I think they're still a really flawed team, especially with Drew Plitt at quarterback, who hasn't really proven much. I think they still need Sloter. But I have Arlington number 5 because they did win a game, even if it was off of 2 pick sixes. Seattle, I have at number 6 because to the argument that I used with St. Louis, where I said that they if they were 0-2, I'd have them as the best 0-2 team. I use that same logic with Seattle because both games they could have won. They barely lost both games that they did lose. And they've had a lot of solid moments. Now, Ben DiNucci, he is slightly flawed in the fact that he won't play consistently well the whole game, and he won't give it to Josh Gordon. And their defense hasn't been able to just get the stops required to win, which is why they are 0-2. But they have looked like the best 0-2 team so far. and they're the only team out of the 0-2 teams that could be 2-0 or could have at least won a game and probably should have won a game. So Seattle's at number 6. And if they do start winning, they will move up. Vegas is at number 7, and that's because of the fact Luis Perez is not playing the way that he was in 2022 USFL and in prior leagues before that. And I do think overall that their system of offense is flawed because they do need a running quarterback to complement Luis Perez, kind of like they did with DeAndre Johnson in the USFL last year. And that's why New Jersey was so good. This year they don't have that. They're relying completely on Luis Perez, and it's not really working out. And their defense has been okay. It's been actually maybe fairly solid, but they haven't been able to get enough stops, and they keep turning it over. And they just haven't been very impressive overall. So they're 0-2 for now, and at number 7. And until they start winning, they won't move up. And the Orlando Guardians are last. That is just obvious. I mean, there's nothing else you can say. You have to put them last because they've been the team that's gotten blown out both games that they've played. They have not looked good on offense outside of their receivers when they do get the ball to them, like Cody Latimer, Charleston Rambo, and others. Outside of those guys and a couple of their defensive players, everybody on the team has just not played well. Everyone at the quarterback position has struggled. Paxton Lynch has struggled. Quentin Dormady, DeAndre Francois. It doesn't matter who it is. They've all struggled. And overall, if Orlando cannot get a new quarterback or get one of the quarterbacks that they currently have to play well, they will keep losing games, and they will stay at the bottom of this list. But if they can start winning, they will move up, but they haven't been able to prove that they can.
In your opinion, of the 3 that are undefeated, the 3 that are winless, who do you think is on the current right projection, or in the case of winless, wrong projection, to finish that way?
Well, Orlando obviously is the team that could finish, winless, because if they don't get the quarterback position figured out, they're not going to win a game. They're not going to win a game, just unless you're playing Vegas and Luis Perez throws 2 pick sixes or something. You might win, but even then you might not. So overall, Orlando is the obvious pick for that. If they can't get the quarterback position figured out, if they cannot turn things around as a team, they won't win a game, or they will go a long time without winning a game. And I hope for their sake, that they can get things figured out. I don't want them to finish winless. That would stink. Hopefully they can get it figured out. But that's an easy pick there. Now, on the other side, I mean, Houston's probably the team that you can see going the farthest. I don't like the fact that they've been turnover prone, but they have been dominant when they don't turn it over. So Houston could be the team that goes the farthest without a loss. I do think every team will lose a game. I don't think all these teams are going to go without losing. I mean, they could, but just to me doesn't seem that likely, but you never know. St. Louis, I mean, they could do that if they get lucky and find a way to win late every single game like they have the first 2 weeks, but eventually you would think that's going to catch up with them. So I would probably say Houston for the wins and Orlando for the losses. The teams that will go the farthest without a win and without a loss.
So to your point, yes, I completely agree with Orlando being most likely to go 0-10. I think that top 3 is like neck and neck. So here's where I stand. I agree with your rankings 97%. 4 through 8 is perfect because the arguments there make complete sense. I'm going to call it more of a difference because this is your opinion. There's nothing wrong with your opinion. My indifference is I think St. Louis is better than DC. I would have St. Louis at 2.
Yes.
Now, granted, as we're going to get to, I believe, in the next segment, St. Louis plays DC this week at DC. And then 2 weeks later, they turn around and play DC again at home at the Dome. Now, the trick with your undefeated argument is if St. Louis and Houston, which I haven't looked at Houston's schedule yet, but St. Louis's schedule between now and Houston is at DC, Arlington at home, DC at home, at Vegas, which is still currently listed as at Cashman Field. Please, to Jeffrey's point, fix that junk. And then after surviving Cashman Field, then they go to Houston and play at Houston for the one matchup this year on, even better, on April Fool's Day. So if St. Louis can get out of DC with a win, I think you're looking at the separation being created right there and bumping St. Louis to 2. Mm-hmm. Now, if St. Louis loses, to your point, I think it will be good because of barely squeaking it out. If they do lose, please do not turn into the 2020 Battle Hawks and just completely fall apart, which you have AJ McCarron and Austin Prohl. And if he was healthy, you'd have Brian Hill. So I don't think you can fall apart that way. But because I have constantly wanted to say St. Louis at number 1, but Houston's been more dominant, to your point. Mm-hmm. So Houston deserves the number 1 spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, basically what you just said is basically what I said about these two teams. The only reason I have St. Louis at 3rd is because of the fact I did the argument of the margin of win. That's the only reason. Because St. Louis could be 0-2 easily. That's the only reason. Because I did say earlier that I said I personally think St. Louis is better than DC. I do. I actually think possibly San Antonio is better than DC. Mm-hmm. But DC's 2-0, and they won by more, even if it was over not very good teams. I do think St. Louis is a better team. I just think as of now, in my opinion, you have to put DC at number 2 because of what they've done. And the rankings are going to change. And like you said, if St. Louis goes on the road and beats DC, then St. Louis is easily going to jump them, and DC is going to fall. It's just based on what they've done right now with the fact that St. Louis almost lost 2 games, they're at 3. Because if they lose to Seattle, if the guy misses a field goal, they're not at 3. They're lower. If they lose the first game, they're lower. I mean, they were down like 2 scores in the first game, and it took a 4th and 15 after a touchdown to get the ball back, and then they scored again. I mean, they almost lost both games. That's why with a power ranking for me, they can't be at number 2 because based off of what they've done, they're not the second best team right now, even though I do think they are the second best team. It's a warped logic, but it makes sense based on what I'm saying. They're 3 right now off what they've done, what they've shown, but I think they're better than DC.
Yes.
If they beat DC, then they will be number 2. Mm-hmm. And if Houston loses, then they'll be number 1.
Yes, that makes complete sense. And I mean, if we're looking at it logically, which I know is how you look at most things, if not everything, this power rankings is perfect the way it is because your arguments are good. You know, DC has been proven to be more dominant than St. Louis. Why? Only in the sense of DC roughly can play more of a whole game than St. Louis has proven to do so. And your point, that's basically what it rides on because they're about to clash. They're about to clash twice in 3 weeks. All right. The segment I think everyone's been waiting for. Week 3 picks. So, March 4th, this Saturday, you have Seattle Sea Dragons going on the road into the god-awful worst stadium.
Cashless field.
Cashless Field. The worst stadium in the XFL. Why? Because the freaking Raiders want to be money hogs and want to be butt munchers. Oh, my goodness. As far as this game,
I just know it was better than last week's.
Yes. I believe that was the only game that did not hit the over for last week. I do expect 7,000 people. With it being Seattle, I would have thought DC would have had a better viewership than they did. With it being Seattle, I think the viewership's going to be down for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start seeing Ben DiNucci grow at quarterback here. It's getting to a point where it's like, is he the guy or not? If he's not the guy, put the next guy in. Don't overwork him like you did in week 1. Start to mold him like you did in week 2. Where does he go from here? For the DC, for the Seattle side. That's kind of where I'm looking at. Involve Josh Gordon more, too. That's another key factor. If you involve Josh Gordon, it's going to make it positive in the long run. For Vegas, I know they're probably, well, I don't know for certain, but my guess is that they're going to start Luis Perez. You've got to start integrating and working on a 2 QB system here. You can't just rotate the quarterbacks in all the time, back and forth. It doesn't help with the O-line, and you already have O-line problems. Fix the quarterback problem. I would go with Hundley. They're not going to do that most likely. I think Seattle is capable of getting their first win here. I'm going to go Seattle. I don't know what the line is. Shouldn't matter, though. But with the score that we saw last week, I'm going to say Seattle wins 20-10.
Yeah, I mean, based off of everything that we've seen from these two teams, this is more than likely going to be a low-scoring game. The line or the over-under is probably going to be low, and it should be because these teams have not scored a lot. And when you're on cashless field, you're not probably going to play at your highest level because of the fact, how can you? I mean, the field's bad. You're not going to, be at your tip-top condition for playing football. So you're probably not going to play well. Both teams aren't playing well, especially Vegas, that well anyway, even though I do think Seattle has definitely been the better team. They, like I said, they could be 2-0, but they haven't done enough. So in this game, if it's not raining and the weather is not bad, then I think this would help Vegas and Luis Perez, with being able to throw the ball better. But I also think it will help Seattle, too, because Ben DiNucci, if he can, get the ball to Josh Gordon earlier in the game than in the second half toward the end, then I think that will help both teams. I mean, if the weather is bad, then both teams are going to be affected by it, and this is going to be a really low-scoring game. But based on what we've seen from these two teams, I do think Seattle's better through 2 weeks. They've looked like the better team. Even though they're 0-2, they've shown potential that they could have been 2-0 if they had just done a few more things right. And if they play like the team that they have the first 2 weeks and Vegas plays like the team they have the last 2 weeks, Seattle will win. Now, if Vegas can break out of this play better, then I think that possibly Luis Perez can get the win. But it's the field is bad, so both teams are gonna play poor. I don't think Vegas is gonna be comfortable, so I do think Seattle will pull it out 17-14.
So to your point, I cannot find the line on this, but It is going to be projected to be 61 on Saturday in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
She said 20-17.
I said 17-14.
Okay.
Seattle.
All right. So, the big day this week. Triple header Sunday. March 5th. All right. So, at I would assume like 1:00, you've got St. Louis going into DC. As we've stated already, this is a big one, really big one. I think even though St. Louis hasn't shown to play a full game yet, I think what we're seeing here right now, in my opinion, I don't know if you noticed this or if I'm just seeing this, or if you think this, but in my opinion, the XFL right now, the way it's trending is every team is basically outside of Houston and whoever plays Houston each week. This league is, let's go out there, have a crappy first half, and just toss everything out there in the second half and have this miraculous second half.
Mm-hmm. And most people turn off by the time the second half happens, so no one sees it.
Mm-hmm. And then they probably see the highlights on SportsCenter and they're like, where was that when I was watching?
Just turn it on at past halftime then. Just don't watch the first half so you won't have to see that, and then watch the second half.
Now, I think this game could make a difference. You know, the key thing too is like Seattle, oh my gosh, St. Louis. Sorry, I'm all over the board. St. Louis has played nothing but road games up until this point. So, in my opinion, that does help them.
Yes. Which I think is crazy that they've opened up the season with 3 road games. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, yes. Very. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to... Gosh. Okay. Focus. All right. In my opinion, St. Louis is better built all over, more weapons than DC. I still think this game will be a little close. At the end of the day, I think it'll be St. Louis 24-18.
Yeah, this game right here, to me, I mean, if you look at these games and they do go the way, you know, on paper that they should go, you're kind of seeing who should win these games. The other 3 games, if the teams play to the same level that they have been. But this is the swing game right here. This one could go either way. Because St. Louis has barely won the first 2 games that they've played. And DC has flaws, but they've won. And it's at DC. The key here is going to be whether Jordan Teamu or De'Aaron King are able to run all over the place. If St. Louis stops them from running everywhere, then I think that St. Louis will win this game easily, fairly easily. But if they allow them to run all over the field, it could get interesting. And St. Louis hasn't, you know, as a team, shown the ability to pull away or get a lead early. They've only squeaked out wins late. So I could definitely see this game going either way. But if McCarran Magic plays out yet again, then they will win. But if, you know, third time's not the charm, then DC will win. And St. Louis will finally show that they are a team that's not great, but they found ways to win the first 2 games. But I'm gonna side with the McCarron Magic. I'll take St. Louis 21-18 over DC, but I think they're gonna win late again. I think they're gonna squeak it out.
Okay. So I did happen to find what we've been looking for. So, okay. The spread for Seattle Vegas is Seattle by 3. The over-under is 38. Not that anybody cares. At least the two of us don't. But the money line is Seattle minus 160. So they're favored. For the game we just talked about, the defenders are favored by 2.
Which makes sense.
The over, yes, because it's in DC. The over-under is 35.5. And the money line is defenders minus 130.
Yeah, and since they have DC only favored by 2, the betting odds are suggesting St. Louis is 1 point better than DC. Because when usually home court or home field, either sport, however you call it, is a 3-point difference. So if you have the home field advantage, it's a 3-point difference. When you don't, if it's like you're favored by 2, that means that they think St. Louis is 1 point better.
Yep. So for the third game of the week, Sunday at 4 o'clock, you got the Orlando Guardians going back on the road, back into Texas here to face the Arlington Renegades. Now that I've found this information, we can be more knowledgeable with the picks. As it currently stands, Renegades are favored by a whopping 9.5. That makes sense because of the way Orlando's played. The over-under's 37.5. Money line Renegades minus 450. I do think the over-under gets covered here. I think it's going to be. Actually, you know what? I don't know if it does or not. But I do give Arlington the edge here. I'm going to go with Arlington just because they have everything else the way they need it. Orlando's is just complete, absolute, horrendous mess. 100%. So I'm going to go Arlington. And if things do go bad, and if Bob Stoops has a brain, not saying he doesn't, if he has a brain, he would be smart to put in Sloter. Because I just, Drew Plitt has been playing average to your point. I don't think he's the guy. I don't understand these silly, I would say stupid, but keep it clean, these silly coach and QB attachments that they have. I mean, just allow the guy that's playing better and performing better at practice be the starter. That's all you have to do. But you can tell if you find the right pictures and the right camera angles, you can tell that Sloter is furious. And there's rumors he's looking for a way out of the XFL to go possibly back to the USFL, which wouldn't be a bad idea.
You should go to Orlando. But, I mean, if he doesn't want to play behind that O-line, I can get it, and wants to start fresh, then it makes sense to go to the USFL.
Absolutely. But so I'm going to go Arlington. This one, I think Arlington's going to really create separation. Oh, give me Arlington 32-10.
Yeah, it's kind of starting to trend that we're picking the same teams again like last week. And it's like I would have, picked DC to be different, but I feel like McCarron Magic will find a way. But you're looking at this game. Nobody's going to pick Orlando.
Mm-mm.
Absolutely nobody. And if you do, it's either you're a fan of the team or you believe in Magic. But McCarron's not on Orlando, so there's no McCarron Magic. So, I mean, anything's possible. That's why the games are played. Orlando could go on the road and Paxton Lynch could just light it up somehow. Or they put in Francois and he rediscovers his Florida State level of play. You never know. But unless that happens, and as long as Drew Plitt plays average, it should be Sloter, but as long as Drew Plitt, who presumably will be the quarterback yet again, plays average, Arlington will win this game. Because Orlando just can't do anything right now. They just can't. As a team, they're flawed everywhere, but especially the quarterback spot and the O-line. So I'm going to go with Arlington to beat Orlando 27-13.
Yes, and for you viewers of ours that are conspiracy theorists and have kept track of our records and do know that I'm only a game back of this gentleman, I swear on my life, on my grave,
it's 6-2 to 5-3.
That we are not picking the same games on purpose.
No. Like, I really wanted to pick DC, but it's like I was going to pick St. Louis. It's almost like we got to mix and match the picks, like who picks the game first. You know, like where I want one game, I pick first, and you pick, and then one game you pick for I pick, so people will know we're not because we don't know what the other's picking. But it's like, for real, we're not picking the same.
I mean, for this week, for example, you basically have, outside of maybe the first and last Sunday games, those ones are really a toss-up in a sense. But to your point, it's like Fitz magic in the NFL with AJ McCarron. You know, those are really a toss-up, those two. But the two on top are just, I mean,
especially the top right one. That is just easy.
I mean, seriously, who's going to pick Vegas and Orlando? Eventually, we're going to have to do one or the other because they're going to play each other.
Oh, that's going to be fun. But no in Vegas, they'll probably have at least a win or two by then, and Orlando will still be 0 and whatever. And I mean, it probably will still be easy to pick.
Just pick based off the record. So you said you're going Arlington?
Yeah, 27-13. Give him a little more credit to Orlando. Maybe they'll get one more stop than you have them getting.
So, the last game of the week. This, to me, feels like St. Louis, San Antonio all over again. It has the potential to be close like that. It has the potential to be a great game. You know, the spread is Roughnecks by 4.5. Money line is Roughnecks minus 200. The over-under is 37.5. You know, I love the way that Brandon Silvers is playing. For being a small college quarterback, he's really good. But I do think it's the weapons around him. I would like to see Borghi continue to explode.
No, he's real good.
Oh man, so good. You want to talk about good running backs? I know Abram Smith was number 1 overall pick by DC, but I mean, come on, man, you ain't got nothing on Borghi. I'm gonna go Houston here. We're not doing this on purpose. I'm gonna go Houston 30, San Antonio 24.
Oh man. Well, I mean, I can't do it. I just can't pick the yellow team. I mean, you know, San Antonio's good. They're 1-1. They got promise. Hines Ward, he went from one yellow team to the next. I mean, it's good things are rolling down there in San Antonio, but Houston's got it going a little bit more right now. I mean, you got Brandon Silvers out of Troy. He's balling out. Max Borghi. out of Washington State, played under the great Mike Leach, rest in peace. And you've just got a team. As long as you don't turn it over, you could possibly win every game the way you're playing right now. They're playing great, but they have been turnover prone. So if San Antonio can exploit that, maybe they can get the win over Houston. But as long as Houston doesn't commit more than 2 turnovers, they should have enough offense the rest of the game to get the win. I will take Houston as well. 28-22.
Okay. This is either going to be a really good week for us or a really bad week.
I feel pretty confident about 3 of them, but really the one I'm kind of not 100% is that St. Louis DC game. I'm not 100% sure there. I can see DC win. I almost picked them, but I didn't. I'm like St. Louis. You got to go with Pickem Magic until it dries up.
Do you think that what's your opinion on the whole Bob Stoops angle for Arlington?
I mean, talking about how good he's doing as a coach and everything.
Yeah, like, do you feel like he's broken the mold as far as like being able to transition from college to, yes, it's not the NFL, but this is still technically pro football?
Well, I mean, if they were 2-0, it'd be a little bit different, but they have, shown that they have some issues overall. So I wouldn't say he's broken the mold yet. I mean, it's not the same game. I mean, again, I'm not saying that when you're at a top college, it's easy, but you're able to bring in, 4 and 5 star talented players. It's I'm not saying it's easy, but you have advantages when you're at a big school versus a smaller school. I mean, that's why Nick Saban at Michigan State led them to 8-4. He had the one year they went like 11-2, and then he went to LSU and won a title. He went to Alabama, and you know what he's done? He's won 6 titles. You have the resources and the abilities to get the job done. When you're in a pro league, and this is technically a pro league, a minor professional league is its correct definition. You're on a level playing field because everybody has the same resources as you do, especially in the NFL. I mean, Major League Baseball doesn't apply because of the fact you see all these teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers, they have so much more money because they're in big markets. And pre-1990s, that's why Cincinnati Reds were great. Johnny Bench, all those guys. They were great. Why? Because the rules were different back then. Now the rules are the teams in the big markets, they have more money and they win. That's why the Cincinnati Reds are horrible. That's why the St. Louis Cardinals are bad. But in the NFL, everyone's on a level playing field. That's why the New York Jets haven't been great. Like, if Major League Baseball was the same rules, the NFL had the same rules as Major League Baseball, then the New York Jets would be dominant. The New York Giants would be dominant in the NFL. They'd be great. And if Major League Baseball had the rules of the NFL, then the Yankees, Mets, Dodgers wouldn't dominate. So it's all about the rules, but in the NFL and in pro football, the rules make it where all the teams are even. And you have to be able to adapt to not having a great advantage. It's not being the best team like you are in college, where if you're at these top universities, you have the advantages, you have the resource. You just do not have that in these leagues, like the NFL and the XFL, where everyone's on a level playing field. And it does expose that maybe you might not be as great as you are. Maybe. That might not be a great way to look at it, but that's how some people would. It's more of you take advantage of what you have versus in these leagues, you can't. You're not used to it. I think maybe like some of these coaches that make the jump were given more time, then maybe they can make it work because they would be able to adapt. But like an Urban Meyer, he got fired after a year. Nick Saban coached for like 2 years and he got fired. In basketball, John Calipari went pro and he got fired after a couple of years. John Beilein resigned after a half season at the Cavaliers. Some of these guys aren't given enough time either. If they were given more time, maybe they could adapt eventually and make it work. But that initial jump is so raw and so different that you're not way above everyone else, and instead you're on a level playing field, that it's so difficult for them to adjust. And they struggle so badly. And with this league, I mean, Bob Stoops, as we've pointed out, plays Sloter. If you play Sloter, that's a good move. You're probably going to play better. So
Mhm.
I think Bob Stoops, I wouldn't say he's broken the mold. He's holding his own right now. But the ones that are doing the best are the ones that were former NFL coaches, like Wade Phillips. Those are the ones doing the best.
Mm-hmm. All right. So our final main topic of the day. One
Says he trusts us.
McLeod. Yes, thank you. McLeod Bethel Thompson from the CFLs, which is Canadian Football League's Toronto Argonauts, has decided he is coming back to the States finally. He is going to play for the obvious, because they're on screen, New Orleans Breakers. I absolutely love this move. It makes complete sense from a personal standpoint with him. Why? His wife works in Atlanta. You know, they're in the hub in Birmingham. That's only a couple hours drive. So it's perfect. Um, he's a decent to good QB. He's definitely, in my opinion, a step down from Sloter, just because of how good Sloter is. But if you look at the back half of the year for New Orleans, he's a complete upgrade from one Shea Patterson, who is absolute dog wash and is just completely fallen off the face of the earth. Well, not completely, because it's technically a backup in Saskatchewan for the Rough Riders of the CFL. I think it makes sense. He obviously still has the motive to want to play in the NFL again. He was a halfway decent quarterback in the NFL. Obviously, just didn't make the cut. Still has the drive. He's got as weird as it is to say about him, he is championship material. He has championship potential. Overall, I like this move. The man was a one-time CFL MVP. He is a two-time Grey Cup champion, which is the CFL's equivalent to the Super Bowl. It's a great move. I do think it can. I do think he can help lead New Orleans over the hump, possibly get to the championship for the USFL this year. And overall, I give it an A and a 9 out of 10, just because we haven't seen the product on the field with New Orleans. What do you think?
Well, I think overall, you look at this move, like you said, for him personally, it's a great move, because based on what you just said, with his wife and everything, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's great for him. There's nothing wrong with playing in Canada. I mean, you got Tim Hortons up there. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, it's cool. But I mean, still, probably playing, where you're close to your wife in, the country you were born in, it's probably, a best fit for him. He has had success in the CFL, and the CFL is a great league for American players. It's awesome that, they take, players like this, and other players that can potentially do things, and succeed where they're not able to play in the States, because there weren't the opportunities like this a few years ago. You didn't have the USFL and the XFL, so you had to play in the CFL. So, I mean, overall, the CFL is a great league. Now it has more competition and more flexibility, where American players can, play in the USFL and the XFL. So for, McLeod Bethel Thompson, makes complete sense that he can play in the USFL. And overall, I mean, you look at his stats. I mean, he's a 34-year-old quarterback, so he is older. which could play to the veteran side, that he will be able to come in and have the experience of playing in a league like the CFL that's similar in quality to this in the USFL. That he could come in and play really well. I mean, overall, I think it's good that he did play in the CFL because he was on the bench, mostly part of the practice squad for so many teams in the NFL for several years. So he was just sitting on the bench, not getting to play. But then, he went to the Toronto Argonauts and played 5 seasons, and that was really good. He threw 70 touchdowns and 49 picks. I mean, those numbers aren't elite. I mean, the picks are a bit high, but it's not terrible. And again, being in the USFL, you can get away with putting up those type numbers. Do I think that he'll ever play in the NFL again based off those stats? Probably not. It's not good enough. 70 touchdowns to 49 picks in an alternate football league is not good enough to be in the NFL. It's just not. I mean, he's solid, and I'm glad he's still playing football. I mean, he's doing what he loves. He's doing what he is way more skilled at than we are to do, which is why he's playing. So I'm glad for him. Great move. Hopefully it works out for New Orleans and they have a lot of success. I mean, it'd be awesome if he lights it up, wins the whole thing, and can go pro again in the NFL one more time, kind of like Josh Johnson was for the 49ers, like the age of 36, 37. And he was, trying to fill in for Brock Purdy, and it did not work. But, I mean, hopefully for Bethel Thompson, he can get back in the NFL. Like I said, based off everything, I've seen, I don't think he will. But hopefully he does have a lot of success in the USFL, and you never know. Maybe he'll get another shot. But it's a great move for him, though. Great move.
Oh, yes. The biggest thing, too, is being able to come back to the States and show off his talents in the States. And, depending on how long he's here in the USFL, with the hub situation, if he's here next year, too, with New Orleans or with another team in the USFL, he can, it's one of those leagues. It's like it has a chance to survive and make it a long time. And it's still pro football. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you talk to the right minor league baseball players, they're content with playing pretty much their whole career in the minors, because that's just where they're going to be at. So I think, yes, I'm not saying he needs to give up his goal playing in the NFL because it's unrealistic, but overall, I think, keep the dream, but also realize this may be the only way to play professional football anymore. Mm-hmm.
He probably wouldn't have gone to the CFL anyway if, the USFL and XFL existed, or, the AAF at the time. I mean, it was 2017 when he left, 2016, 2017 was when he was out of the NFL. Mm-hmm. And that's why he went to the CFL. Now you have options, and that's what's cool. There's nothing wrong with going to the CFL. It's still a great option. I wouldn't, suggest not to do that. It's like a Shea Patterson. I mean, whatever works, whatever league wants you, whatever league's going to take you is great. But if you have the opportunity to come back and you want to come back to the States to play instead of in the Canadian Football League, then like with Bethel Thompson, it's a great move. And hopefully he has a lot of success. Absolutely. I'm just glad all these leagues are out there for these players. It's awesome, and we get to watch all of them. All these leagues are great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I 100% agree. We're slowly but surely getting some good football, and it's overall just a good thing. Just hope that it works out for him, and it's productive and worth his time to come down here. I'm a little surprised that he chose New Orleans as far as who he chose, but again, wife working in Atlanta, hub in Birmingham, it makes sense. So unless, once the USFL spreads its wings and goes to its own cities, unless they bring in a team in Atlanta or a suburb of Atlanta, he's probably going to stay in New Orleans.
I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, that none of these leagues do have a team in Atlanta. I mean, it's huge. I mean, I know you have the Falcons, but you also have Seattle Sea Dragons, Seattle Seahawks, so that's not a problem. I know there hasn't been a team, and Atlanta is a big market, and there would be a lot of fans at those games. So,
I mean, maybe this is the motivation that the league needed to, when they do make the next expansion, bring a team in Atlanta. I wouldn't call them the Atlanta Legends. I would leave that one alone. Maybe Atlanta Firehawks or something, but I mean, they do have the Falcons, so maybe they want to stay away from the whole bird thing.
Yeah, I probably couldn't come up with a name as of this time, but somebody's out there. There's always someone to name things. There's that guy out there that probably named 100 billion things. So overall, they could come up with a name for an Atlanta team. I just think it would work.
Absolutely. Well, I've kind of run out of things to talk about. You're kind of on a crunch time. And yeah, it was an awesome show today. I know we went a little long. I do apologize for that. We're just glad to be here every Wednesday or every week, because life happens. Things do come up. There could be sometimes we got to change the time and day we do it, but we're happy to come on once a week for y'all and break some stuff down, preview some stuff. And yeah, we look forward to the awesome games this weekend. Hopefully awesome. I do think majority will be.
Hopefully the Vegas one will at least be average. If that game's average, then the whole slate's probably going to be really good.
Yes. I'm hoping to get more viewership on the Vegas game than last week. I mean,
hopefully
that game as a whole was just in the toilet, so to speak. It's just not good at all. Lowest attendance of the week, lowest ratings of the week. Vegas, to your point, is a good market, I think. It's just a matter of producing a good enough team to make people want to either go out and watch or watch the team on TV.
Yes.
So, but anyway, we're looking forward to the games. We we picked this exact same, not on purpose. We're going to discuss about changing the way we pick. I'm open to it. Hopefully we go 4-0 or we go 0-4. Rooting for 4-0 for sure. But yes, tune in next week, Wednesday. As of right now, Wednesday at 2:00. And I hope everyone enjoys their week. We'll see you back here next week. And have a good one.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks for being here. Like, comment, subscribe.